You've watched the Miles Morales gameplay trailer multiple times, but did you spot the possible connections to Luke Cage and Wakanda? Hey, Chris Baker here with a few fun things to talk about after the latest Miles Morales video. I'm a little short on time, so let's get right to it. Let's start with a fun little Easter egg. When you see a combination of numbers and letters on a vehicle in a comic book game or movie, there's a pretty good chance they're referencing a comic book issue. Not so with IG-31. It's not even related to comics. It's related to the developer, Insomniac Games, IG, with Miles Morales being their 31st game. And how am I just now learning they helped with Death Stranding?
Freaks me out too.
Well, here's another Easter egg, a little more rooted in Marvel. And thanks to Javik122 on Twitter for cementing it in my brain. As Miles rounds the corner here, we see the image of a woman's face on the wall. It enhances the aesthetics of a jaunt through East Harlem, and though I can't fully be certain, I think it does more than that. It lets us know a certain Luke Cage villain has a presence here in Harlem. Did you watch his Netflix show? Or maybe even read old Power Man comics? I'd say this is a happy medium between the two representations of Mariah Dillard, the crime lord with a lot of influence in Harlem, and maybe even a public face of legitimacy as a councilwoman. It's like she has the look of the TV version, and the earrings and hairstyle of her comic book interpretation. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Here's a link to the comics that's a bit more certain. Listen to Insomniac creative director Brian Horton here.
The Underground attacks Roxxon, sending the rally into chaos in a fight that spills onto the Braithwaite Bridge, where the Underground tries to steal Roxxon's experimental energy source, Nuform.
If you thought Devil's Breath in Peter's game was a deep cut to the comics, just wait till you get a load of Nuform. Whereas Mr. Negative's concoction played a pretty major role in the comics for quite some time, Nuform debuted in a 3-part story called The Vibranium Vendetta and spanned Spider-Man annuals, not even the core books, in 1991, and as near as I can tell, we never saw it again. The Vibranium Vendetta is not one of my favorite Spidey tales, and without getting into too much detail, because frankly it doesn't warrant it, it pits Spider-Man, Black Panther, and Iron Man against villains like Kingpin, Ghost, and Ultron, sometimes even having the bad guys fight each other, which is probably the highlight. As it is in Miles' game, Nuform is introduced as a highly coveted creation of Roxxon, but that seems to be where the similarities end. Just like Devil's Breath differs from its comics origins, Nuform is not so much an experimental volatile energy force as it is an experimental volatile metal. Synthetic vibranium to be more specific, which is what brings Black Panther into the story in what has to be one of his least purely heroic appearances. T'Challa states pretty clearly that Nuform would severely wound Wakanda's economy. He's not there because Roxxon is doing something entirely evil, it comes off more like he's there for corporate sabotage. Another thing that seems a little off about the Vibranium Vendetta, remember how I mentioned it's a 3-issue story? The first of those issues identifies the substance as Nuform. But then they just totally dropped that name for the second and third. It's like they forgot what they even called it. Or maybe they just didn't expect the audience to remember the name. Instead, in those last 2 issues, Nuform is referred to something like synthetic vibranium or artificial vibranium. So it goes without saying that there's no real legacy with Nuform. It's not a big part of the comics, and I'm a little perplexed as to why Insomniac is digging that name up from the dead for something that's apparently quite different outside of Roxxon's involvement. But then again, I'm also always a fan of deep cuts from comics, and this is as deep as it gets.
Yes!
Let's wrap things up with a prediction about the Tinkerer. As you know by now, the character, who first appeared way back in the original Amazing Spider-Man number 2 in 1963, is most definitely not an old man named Phineas Mason in Miles' game.
We're after the Nuform. Ignore everything else.
Rather, like the move of Ghost from the comics to Ant-Man and the Wasp and Iron Man VR, he is a she, and appears to be quite young at that. So who is she under that mask that she might have gotten from a prop store auction of Solo: A Star Wars Story? My friend Carlos on Twitter posted a couple of solid notions. Cerise Goldstein actually hails from Miles' comics, and though she's not related to the Tinkerer, definitely, well, tinkers with machinery like Phineas does. Carlos and others have also suggested maybe it's Yuri Watanabe, seemingly forgoing her Wraith alter ego for this one, based on some outfit similarities. I think Cerise is more likely here, but here's a novel idea. She's just a young female version of the Tinkerer we've never met before. It's a unique universe, you can do that. Although I do like the idea of her maybe being the granddaughter or daughter of Phineas himself. Peter's 9 years of experience at this point very well may have brought him face to face with the old man, and maybe he put him in the slammer. Whatever the case, I'm thinking they're pulling another Mr. Negative here, elevating a character who turns out to be important, but not the villain throughout the course of the game. My money's still on the Prowler, but who knows? Maybe Into the Spider-Verse's popularity brings Kingpin into the picture. Which could very well be why Nuform as a name is involved since he was a big bad in that. Or hey, maybe they actually showed us the big bad in this already. We talked about her.
You need me out there. You want me out there.
We're less than 2 months away from finding out. If for some reason you'd like to read the Vibranium Vendetta, here's a link to the Kindle page, which is also compatible with Comixology. Buying it via this link helps support this channel, and so does clicking on any of the other fine videos you also see pictured. Thanks for joining me, everybody. I'll see you next time.